Today, we're going to be talking about challenges that we faced within the child and youth care field or while working with young people in general. I want you guys to take a second to think about any challenges that you've had to face recently within this internship or the internship we took back in our second year. Is there any challenges that somebody would like to speak about?
I'll start. So I guess as of recently, I've had difficulty working with one youth in particular who I work closely with on a weekly basis. So I won't go too much into it, but there are issues around his behavior and how he interacts with the children and I guess teachers as well. And we find that sometimes we tried implementing I don't know, just consistency and like routine with him, but I don't know, we found that it just doesn't stick. And at times we were stuck. We're like, how do we like approach dealing with, I guess, his behavior and like what do we do? So I don't know, with that, we're still kind of learning how to manage and like implement these kind of approaches with this individual. And I don't know, it's still a work in progress. It's something that I'm still learning, and yeah, I guess that's just a big challenge for me right now.
That's understandable. Have you guys tried asking the parents on what they do?
See with that, there is I don't know, I'll say like we're not kind of meeting a middle ground. Like they'll kind of say, oh, at home, like he doesn't act in this way, and um, I don't know, he just doesn't display this behaviors. That's like kind of what we've been receiving on their end. So then from there, we're just like, okay, we don't know what to do. How do they manage? And I don't we don't want to enforce things that they're not comfortable with too. So I guess that there's just a lack of communication and just transparency overall.
I understand. I feel like it's a big issue, especially within the school system. There's a family of three at one of the schools that I internship at, and they have quite a lot of behaviors on a day-to-day basis. The two youngest children, they kind of get into the worst meltdowns, and we've tried talking to the parents about it, and the mom would say that that's just how her kids are, and her grandparents would say, you just have to leave them be, and eventually when they get older, they will be better. And I sometimes feel like there's like disconnect between leaving children alone to do with their own things or having to help them.
I just want to add that I can understand there's a similar situation. So one client, is in a live-in treatment center or a live-in house, yeah, live-in residence. And they've just moved in there, and then they're also attending a day treatment program, but it's a separate program. Between those two programs, without naming them, one is kind of adding, like, so they'll call the house and tell the CYCs there, okay, so this is what you need to do, and this is what you need to do, and this is what you need to do. And so we were kind of having this discussion, and what's hard and what's difficult is that they have their way of doing things, and then we have our way of doing things. So to me, it's almost like it's not just the behavioral part of it, but it's how one place addresses something, like with the same goals in mind, so to speak, but like the setups are different. So it's like with parents and schools, it's this whole like what's being delivered at home versus what you're doing at school. And then it creates this conflict. And so you're kind of there to assist and help. And then it's like, like where do I really go with this, you know?
I understand. Every time my supervisor speaks to one of the parents about continuing something that we started at school, at home, we kind of have to hope that the parent will continue doing it even without our support outside of school. I know I have a few challenges at school when my supervisor's not there. Sometimes we will be in a situation where we're dealing with one kid, but then we're called down to work with another. And usually during those times, I go help in the other area. One of those times, I was helping one of the students that usually has meltdowns. And when she's in this mood, she won't listen and she won't speak. So sometimes trying to calm her down or de-escalate her is a little tricky. And I was wondering if anybody had any tips for this.
I'll go with that. So on the weekend, I had a shift and I'm relatively new in this particular house, and this is probably my fourth or fifth time working there. So now I'm like starting to get to know the different behaviors and different things from what these clients can present. And so I had that experience. So this client was, trying to run into somebody else's bedroom while that person was sleeping, trying to barricade themselves. Um, their behavior was really aggressive, and at one point it was like, they were just cursing at us, saying, "I'm gonna hurt you, I'm gonna hurt you." Um, in those moments when it's really escalated, you're kind like in that moment, I will say, like, you really think back to training. Like, and so training like CPI, if you've heard of it. And so using that training was like, because you're there and you have to think, okay, I'm here to support them. I'm here to keep them safe. Like you're down to basics. Like you're not doing much talking. So I think in terms of what you're asking, like how best to support those situations is really take it minute by minute and just kind of make sure you're safe, make sure they're safe, make sure the area is safe, and take it one step at a time from there.
And just to add to that, I don't have a direct experience in CYC, but I have worked with children. It's more tutoring based, but I have worked with children from younger ages to like early adolescence and teenage years. And I've had experienced some of these situations as well in my sessions. And I find like a good tip that just can work for both situations is, of course, like you have to stay calm and regulate yourself. But I also think validating their emotions and avoid diminishing their feelings and saying phrases such as calm down and relax, because I feel like that could escalate the situation. So I think patience is a very strong factor when dealing with children and youth like that.
Um, Just to like add in too and like kind of highlight what we've been talking about, I feel like hanging in, like what you said, Angela, taking it minute by minute, just like acknowledging that like in our work too, like it does take time for a youth to like open up and kind of, especially because it's in a school environment, it's different from the home. It's different structures all the way around. So it's like different structures and environments will have different reactions and experiences. So just acknowledging that, I feel like will help in understanding kind of, I don't know how to say it. If anybody else could add on.
Those are all really great advice. Thank you guys. I know usually I try to distract her before trying to get her to calm down. And usually there was this one time I brought a crocheted animal, took it apart, showed her how to put it back together, and she calmed down. There was another time where I started saying a few random things like the sky is green just to get her confused, and it actually did work. She did start looking at me, she started talking again, and we eventually figured out what was wrong. But you guys have great advice. I do have a question. At one of my internship places, there's teachers that refuse to work with certain students in their class because of their behaviors. There was this one time where one of the kids was throwing a tantrum, or sorry, having a meltdown inside the classroom. He was throwing crayons around, and all the kids were evacuated from the class. But none of the teachers stayed inside the classroom with the student. They stayed outside in the hallway. What is your guys' opinion on that?
So one of my placements, this had actually happened. Um, so there is a new kid who was still, he was very like his age was like, I think 7 or 8, but his mindset was very much like a toddler. So like 3 or 4. So getting his way was something that was very important. And when they would get upset, they would start literally just tearing the room apart. In that instance, the best thing, and like I said before, is the safety of everybody else. So if it's easy to remove that child, then remove them. But when they're in that moment and they're in that tantrum, it's like to get them kind of distracted. Like, yeah, like trying to confuse them and trying to do those things, you know, sometimes work. But like again, it really comes down to like the first thing of like safety. So I mean, yeah, it's a bit of an inconvenience if you think about it. Oh gosh, like I gotta evacuate everybody. I gotta move everybody out of here. Like now the kids aren't gonna learn, the parents are gonna call, and then the other thing too, like we've got to keep in mind is that the teachers have um different types of things that kind of support them, right? Like for us, it's like if we get hit or kicked or something like that, it's kind of like it comes with the territory, but it's a whole different thing for a teacher to kind of go through that, right? Um, I don't know if anybody wants to kind of connect with this or if they have anything else to add,
Yeah.
but I just literally, again, it's just about the safety piece. So yeah, go ahead, gentlemen.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely agree. It's also too, yeah, I'll just chime in by saying that's where like I guess our role as like a CYC comes in where we have to like advocate for like that young person and just communicating on a professional level with like teachers like that who don't want to work with youth like that and just say, hey, like yeah, for sure like there is a different I guess, background in a sense. Like with teachers, like they don't really go through like I guess the theories that we learn and like what they learn too. Like it's very different. So just kind of relaying that and just expressing your piece and how you see it and just being that I guess messenger for the young person and saying, "Hey, this is what they are going through," and I guess just in a professional manner, of course, just saying, "Hey, like obviously this is not working. You have to kind of see where they're at. You have to get on their level to, I guess, if you want things to change, yeah, you definitely have to apply that like youth lens and just yeah, see it from their perspective.
Yeah.
Point
Perfect.
two, because sorry, I just want to add this little note. Angela, you brought up safety and like Ashanti, like hearing your that ex like experience. I couldn't help but just think, what about the safety of the child that was left in the room? Like just left, like they were just left alone. Like I understand like the safety of others, like the kids especially, like the other classmates, but I feel as a role as a teacher too, like even though they're not like trained and in that experience, just I just can't help but think about the safety and the child of that room. Like obviously they're going through intense emotions. They're going, yeah, they might be having a tantrum, but obviously they need the emotional support. They need like they need an adult to help them manage it. And so just leaving them in the room, it's just, okay, what is this doing to their physical, their emotional health by just leaving them by themselves?
I do also agree with that. Like I see both points like clearly, but I do think even though the teacher doesn't have the same um, I guess the same extent of knowledge as CYCs, it is still their duty to educate, and it's their responsibility to still support all students, including those with behavioral issues. And I do agree, like, safety is the most important. It's definitely important to ensure everyone is safe when a situation like that arises. But to leave them alone, I do think is a little extensive. I think, like they're also the teacher student, like they
I
also
just want to jump in very quickly just to kind of address it because I agree exactly with what you guys are both saying. But in those instances, no, like what ends up happening if there's a CYC or an EA, you're literally eyes on the majority of the time. So if it's not safe for you to be in the room, you're leaving the room. But if it's you're looking for those things that happen. So if that kid ends up, with a pair of scissors, you're obviously not going to let anything else kind of go to that. But it's also considering the safety of yourself. You're definitely concerned with the safety of that child, which is what I agree with. But you kind of have to let them blow off that steam. So from what I witnessed, the CYC would either stand inside the classroom and let, things play out and make sure the area that they were in was relatively safe. Also, certain things were not available, on hand for them to harm themselves. So there wasn't a lot laid out. I recognize, like, in a typical classroom, you're obviously going to have things like scissors and arts and crafts and things like that, right? Um, but I think it's like you're a little bit more equipped because you have like you would have a background on a kid who throws tantrums. You would have a background of knowledge knowing whether that kid has um some sort of uh suicidal ideation, I guess. Like, do you need to keep sharps away? Do you need to do those things? So, and again, no, not always, but it's the safety for everybody is always considered, but it's difficult in those situations. Like, is it really fair for that kid to be in there by themselves? Maybe not. Well, that's my rant.
This seems like a perfect place to end our podcast. This concludes our podcast for our challenges within the child and youth care field and working with young people in general.
Thank you, Ashanti.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.